Welcome back to Reviews and Rankings with Robbie Sobel, and today I continue my journey along with my fellow campers through Camp Crystal Lake, stopping only for Friday the 13th Part 3 in 3D. Friday the 13th Part 3 is directed by Steve Miner and stars Dana Kimmel, Catherine Parks, Larry Zerner, and Richard Broker. Alright guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're talking about Friday the 13th Part 3. But it's not just myself that are giving you these reviews. I'm joining along with several other channels. A bunch of my friends on YouTube have come together to give you the largest collaboration ever for Friday the 13th on YouTube. Every Friday we are going to be dropping a review for the next sequel in the franchise, stopping on Friday the 13th in August as we reveal to you our Friday the 13th franchise ranking. You can see on this screen all their faces so you can get their face to their channel names, as well as clicking in the description below where you'll be able to get the links to all of their channels and reviews. Well, the release of Friday the 13th Part 3 was not a surprise. Friday the 13th Part 2 just a year earlier brought in nearly $22 million at the box office on a budget of only $1.2 million. Now, while that wasn't as big of a return as the first film in the franchise, it's still a big profit for Paramount Pictures, who are quick to greenlight yet another sequel. In an attempt to kind of put a colorful spin and gimmick on the next entry, they decided to do what many horror films did in the early 1980s, and that was utilize the 3D effect. Most notably, we saw Amityville 3 and Jaws 3 use the 3D effects to their advantage, so Friday the 13th and Jason took a stab at it. Get it? Stab? No? Well, Friday the 13th Part 3 takes place immediately after the second entry. Friday the 13th Part 3 feels like the second entry in a trilogy of films within the franchise. Part 2, 3, and 4 all take place over the same weekend. And if you watch them together, it kind of just all takes place and overlaps with each other. So the second entry takes place on Friday. This Part 3 takes place on a Saturday. And then Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, takes place on a Sunday. After the massacre at the camp in Friday the 13th Part 2, final girl Ginny is put into the ambulance. She's taken away. The rest of the bodies are all kind of piled up and sent to the morgue, all while a girl named Chris and a bunch of her friends decide to go to a cabin on the other side of Crystal Lake. So Chris is coming back to Crystal Lake for the first time in at least a year or two here in the film, because she was a victim of assault. It was kind of hinted that it could have been sexual assault, but they don't really go into all of the details. But we later learned that the person that assaulted her was Jason himself. She was able to somehow get away, but the memories of that night have haunted her ever since. So she's decided a year later to come back to try to kick those memories, start fresh, and face her fear. Unfortunately for Chris and her friends, she picked a terrible weekend to do so. Chris and her friends meet up with Chris's boyfriend, Rick, who's there to try to help calm her nerves, but unfortunately he doesn't do really the best job out of it at all. The most likable and most memorable person in this group is a guy named Shelly. Now, he's a little bit overweight, he's got a big curly hair, big curly fro, and he's very insecure with himself. And because he's insecure with himself, he tries to deflect away from that by just being funny. So he has a lot of these gags and jokes and pranks in an attempt just to be kind of the class clown, which it really doesn't go over well. No one really thinks he's funny. They just think he's annoying and stupid. But you feel bad. There's some sympathy there with the Shelly character. He's very similar to me compared to like Franklin from Texas Chainsaw, but a lot less annoying. In addition to Chris, Rick, Shelly, and the gang, they meet up with another gang later on. During a trip to the convenience store, Shelly and his little crush for the weekend named Vera have a run-in with an angry biker gang. And after a mini scuffle, that biker gang ends up tailing them and finding them at the cabin. But unfortunately for them, they don't run into Shelly again, but they run into Jason, and they meet a pretty tough demise. Now, that biker gang is pretty fun. They're a nice little add-on addition to the film, and it's something that the film really needed, because you couldn't just have another film with just this kind of generic group of counselors or friends. Outside of Shelley, everyone else in the group is pretty generic. They're not really memorable. We kind of have a like a Cheech and Chong type of couple who are just smoking all the time, but it's really not that memorable at all, and Shelley's the one that really stands out. Now, there's a few other things I have to point out in this movie. The use of the 3D effects. Now, some of the 3D effects that they use are kind of cheap and pretty obvious. There's a scene where Shelley throws his wallet, and you can see it coming at the screen, or the character of Andy using a yo-yo that gets propelled down to the screen. So that's a little bit cheesy, but the best use of 3D here is probably the death of Chris's boyfriend, Rick. Outside one of the cabins, Jason grabs him from behind, grabs him behind his head and starts to push forward, and you see his eyeballs shoot right out at the screen. Now, if you watch it in 2D, if you look a little closer, you can kind of see the string pushing the eyeball out, but I'm sure in the theater that it really went over well with the audience, and when you put it into perspective, it's a pretty cool kill. I checked in with my parents, my mom and my dad, who saw this movie in 3D in the theater, so they were able to confirm to me that the 3D was actually really cool and they had a great time doing it. I wish I could have seen it in 3D, but I guess I'll have to just live vicariously through the memories of my parents. Now, Shelley is most known for bringing the hockey mask into the franchise of Friday the 13th. During one of his pranks where he jumps out of the water wearing a wetsuit, a spear, and his hockey mask, he fails to impress Vera, who instead of laughing and joking at the prank, honestly gets scared and kind of frightened. She doesn't really know who Shelley is, and all of a sudden he jumps out of the water with a spear. I'd be kind of scared too. It's pretty creepy. Shelley, embarrassed, retreats to the barn. He just feels down and disgusted and depressed with himself. But unfortunately, Jason is there, and he's going to put Shelley out of his misery by slicing his throat and stealing his hockey mask. Now, we got to mention the ending of this film. Chris and Jason are in the barn, and they're fighting it out, and she ends up hanging him by a noose. Now, Chris thinks that Jason is dead, and she makes her way to the front of the barn, only for Jason to be resurrected or just coming back to life again. And he pulls the mask up to reveal a disgusting, grotesque face. It contradicts from the look that we saw from Friday the 13th Part 2. Jason puts the mask back down, and that's where Chris grabs an axe and hits him right over the head and in the face, which seems to put him down for the count. Now, for the rest of the Friday the 13th movies, we see the giant axe mark in the top of his hockey mask, and it's all because of Chris. Chris ends up on the lake, and does she have a dream? Does she not have a dream? We see the body of Mrs. Voorhees with her head, which doesn't seem to make sense, pull Chris into the lake before she wakes up and the police and whatnot and the ambulance are there. So we're left kind of with this mystery ending once again, but we get to see Jason's face, we get to see the hockey mask, and we get to see the final girl of Chris kicking some serious ass. It's a pretty cool ending. I dig it, and I think you will too. For the most part, Friday the 13th is a pretty solid entry into the franchise. I find it to be a pretty good movie, and I enjoy it. I watched it often as a kid. It's one of the first Friday the 13th VHS tapes that I actually ever owned, so I watched it constantly, even though it's kind of on the lesser end of those earlier Friday movies. After the first two, which really delivered the goods to me, the third one kind of felt like a placeholder to get us to part 4. It's still a fun watch, but it's not one that I would put in above some of the other entries in the franchise. Alright guys, here comes the fun stuff of the review. I'm going to deliver to you my coolest kill for Friday the 13th, Part 3. Now there's a bunch of pretty solid ones in this film, but I'm going to have to go with the death of Andy. Andy and his girlfriend Debbie joined along with Chris in the cabin, and after they fooled around a little bit, Andy's about to head downstairs to get some beer, but he decides to do it in style. On his hands, doing a handstand in his jeans, just walking, but unfortunately he meets up with Jason. Oh, this is a really cool shot. We get the shot of Jason from a low angle. So we're basically the eyes of Andy as Jason lifts up his machete from above his head and comes down hard between Andy's legs and cuts him in half. The uncut version of this kill is even more graphic, and it is a brutal one. Imagine getting cut in half by a man in a hockey mask. Sheesh, I'll tell you, the effects on this were pretty awesome. They were on point, and I just wish that I could have seen this in 3D, just to see Jason's machete coming right down on us as the viewer and seeing that body just crumble into pieces and cut in half would have been pretty dope. Andy, cut in half, handstand kill, that is my coolest kill. Alright guys, it's finally time for my absolute favorite part of every review in this Friday the 13th franchise, and that's the Deadliest Diva! Now, I have to give you a little bit of a warning. We're in for a slight drop-off compared to the first two films. In the original Friday the 13th, we got Marcy. She was beautiful, she was sexy, she got it in with Kevin Bacon's character Jack, and she was constantly cold. And then she was done in by a deadly axe to the head kill. In Friday the 13th Part 2, we were graced on the screen by the incredibly thick and sexy and wild and adventurous Sandra, who also died by getting it in with her boyfriend Jeff in the classic shish kebab scene. Man, she was pretty sexy, this girl, and she had a wild side to her, so she was hot too. Unfortunately, in Friday the 13th Part 3, we don't really have a lot to pick from in regards to like sexy babes. But we do have one girl who's got a girl next door cute look, and that's our main final girl, Chris. Now, she's really reserved, and she's not the type of girl that you're gonna like meet up with and just fool around with on the first night. This girl is straight girlfriend material, and I can respect that. You know, I'm getting a little older now. I'm in my mid to late 30s, and I'm looking to kind of settle down at some point. I don't need to just be running around with the Marcys and the Sandras of the world who just want to fool around and get me in trouble. No, no, no. If you're looking to settle down, Chris is the girl for you. She's pretty, she's got a good head on her shoulders, she's looking to face her fears. And while fooling around with a girl like Sandra might be pretty good if you're like 20, 21 years old, maybe if you want to start a more serious relationship a little bit, you can go towards Marcy. She seemed like she was starting to develop a little bit more. But if you want a girlfriend, if you want to settle down with somebody, I think Chris is the type of girl for you. Chris, our Deadliest Diva for Friday the 13th Part 3, with a more than respectable 7 out of 10. Alright guys, Friday the 13th Part 3 was not loved by critics. That's not a surprise, but I have to admit, when I checked the Rotten Tomatoes score, I was a little bit shocked by how low it was. If you can look right here, 7% critic score. That is absolutely terrible, even for a film like this. And an audience score of only 42%. Listen, I'm not the biggest Friday the 13th Part 3 fan in regards to putting it at the top of my ranking, but it's not that bad at all. 7% on the critics and 42% on the audience score. I think both of them are out of line and totally lowballing. You want to come to somebody who knows what he's talking about? Come to me and come to my friends who are joining me along this hike. Friday the 13th Part 3 is getting a pretty solid 3 out of 5-star rating. Alright guys, what did you think of Friday the 13th Part 3? Is it your favorite entry? Is it one that you hate? Does it fall somewhere in the middle like myself? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you liked this video, you can hit like. If you loved it, you can subscribe. And of course, you can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter at RankingsRS. So thanks for checking out the channel, guys, and keep watching movies.